typing. I was like, it's lunch hour, but all right.
I brought Rusty with you.
I feel like there's low attendance in the office in general today because of
It's
polar
freezing.
vortex outside.
Low activity at all.
It's Antarctica today.
Dude, look at this beautiful sun, right? And it's like,
Want to go out in your
Deadly.
shorts and a t-shirt?
no.
Okay, you are online right now. I just gotta share the link
Okay.
and just be mindful of it.
We're getting recorded too.
And then you guys have a dream me that I can use.
I could use Jeff's Asperger's.
What is this?
Jeff Asperger is like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if
Otherwise, I just have to point the camera at this your device.
I mean, we don't have much to present. I mean, it's gonna be just fun
Okay, I'll
pictures.
focus
of
on your
it.
guys' faces. You guys stay here.
Like red on me.
These colors.
This is great.
Okay. And then, you guys want to ask for announcements right now? Like, while I'm
For
finding
what?
the link? You could just ask the room if there's any announcements.
Sure.
Ah, see.
Where did that go?
I don't see anybody that would give an announcement.
No.
It's there.
I know, people always have.
Apparently, she didn't think the movie was supposed to be already considering as a
Give the podium to someone. Here. I'm giving you the podium, man. Later. Dude, the Gold Coast one has beautiful views and like balconies for barbecue, huge, a big gym, and
Put some bids in? Did you put some bids in?
I'll put a bid today. The other one's right next to Kevin's place.
Getting recorded.
That's fine. The other one's next to Kevin's place. So you know
Streeterville.
how
Did
much
you get the street?
beer pong is gonna be.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you help us recruit people to come here? Clearly, I'm not friendly enough to get people to move, so that didn't work. I tried. Panos tried. It didn't work.
I brought my team. I brought Rusty. He's here.
I'm a one-man
Where are you
team,
guys
so
sitting?
The
See,
U
there
line.
you go. See,
The
I don't
old,
even know where anyone is anymore.
the old U line. Next to Gold Coast.
That's where Uline was? Before?
Your one-man team?
Alright guys,
Yeah.
we're gonna get started. This is the Qcon Recap. If anyone has any announcements they'd like to begin with, now is your time.
Corbin!
Corbin! Well, obviously,
Ugly sweater, I guess.
ugly sweater party today.
She's already primed.
Be there, be square.
Where you going?
Corbin.
Okay, so keep me honest by standing there, remembering what I'm gonna say. There's ugly sweater going on party at the end of the day today at 4 o'clock. There are food.
there are
There are
food.
beverages. There will also be Secret Santa dealio, so make sure you give those gifts out. And then fourthly, there's some judging going on with the ugly sweaters themselves. There we go, for bribe 'em. And then there's something else. Oh, holiday. Yes. Whatever you signed up for. I don't know. Quesadillas.
Now.
Quesadillas for life.
Alright,
Thanks, Corbin. Thanks, Corbin.
without further ado, Qcon.
I got a couple announcements.
Oh,
Segments.
sorry.
More ado.
Yes.
There's a couple hackathons coming up. There's an Amazon Internet of Things hackathon, December 27th and 28th. If you have questions, all day.
Is anyone gonna be both of those?
Trust me, there's always people there. I was here last year, so I know there are people.
They have like Amazon
What is
One
it, hack
staff,
timing?
so they don't have anything that week, so that's kind of like.
Oh, so that's where it got set up. I was asking about that, when we were at the AWS, the last thing.
Just to clarify, it's not local. It's in Chicago. It's not big.
Yeah, no, it's like a huge lab that they have in their center.
Yeah.
If you have more questions, contact Matt Hauser or Kyle. Also, there's another hackathon for Chicago market for IM&A and DS, and they reached out to us as well to participate. We're trying to put together, and actually, Thomas, you know about this,
Yeah.
a proof of concept application for data visualizations, like with Tableau, for instance.
And Power BI. I implemented the Power BI for them.
Okay.
So yeah, tomorrow's that.
Yep. So they're looking, if you're interested, let me know. I can send you the invite. They're meeting tomorrow. And then Hustle Up the Hancock. There's been some adjustments made to the app, but there's some more that still need to be made. So if you're interested in participating, I'd say start with contacting Burton Podzerzewski. Burton P.
Did McGovern work on it as well, or no?
He did, yes. Yep. They made a lot of progress, so that's in a much better state. It's React, Code, trying to think what else. We're trying to move it over to AWS. Right now it's on Heroku on the personal account. It's Lanya under Psalm's account. But like I said, if you're interested, you can contact me, but Barton's going to give you more insightful information. That's it.
Cool.
Alrighty. Sounds good.
Yeah, let's start.
All right, so for the people who didn't freeze or stay seated at their desks, thanks for joining us. So we all went to Qcon, 5 of us. I think a lot of this floor has gone to Qcon in the past. It's been running in San Fran for 10 years and other places, and a lot of folks have gone to New York out of the Chicago office too. So I don't know if anyone here has gone to one before. Has anyone? All right, clearly they're all missing. We all have. So say we had a good time. So we have some stuff to share. We're excited to tell you guys about like some of the talks that we all, each of us, like kind of individually liked. By no means did we go to every talk. There was go. All right. So there's like 170 plus talks. There's like 6 at any given time going on across all the rooms of this giant hotel. So it was like chaotic from that standpoint. But you can see pretty much everything. So the way they set it up was kind of cool. They basically did 3 separate days. Each day has different tracks. So there's a track lead, and then each track has the different talks, right? And they kind of kept the sponsored stuff off to its side, and some people talked through some of those. But that was nice. And most of the speakers were all kind of from any kind of company you could imagine, right? And they go and advertise and say, hey, it's Google, Netflix, all these others. It was them more and more and more. There's startups there too. There's people from big industry. We saw folks. There's people from like Nordstrom and all these places you never expect that have vivid dev environments, and they brought their leadership and actual developers here too to come learn too. So definitely a good environment to try and learn from some of that. They kind of set up evening events on all 3 of the days. Last day was kind of light because everyone kind of had home, but at least the other 2 was like meet and greets. They had happy hour type things, as you could expect, at a function of mostly, I guess, our age males. It was that. But either way, they did do some good initiatives towards kind of grouping people together towards different like-minded kind of concepts and things you might want to care about. So I'm not going to read through all these, but they kind of anchored each one with a keynote that didn't actually necessarily define the day. They just kind of had key people talk for an hour to kick off your day. Days are long. I think we were there like 9 to, the kickoffs were like 8:30 or 9 till like 6:15. Like this is the only time I think any of us have been at a conference where there's a talk that starts at 5:20, which is aggressive. And unfortunately, or fortunately, some of the best talks we saw were at that slot. So we stuck around, so we passed it back to you guys. Everything was recorded. We went to a lot of different things actually. We didn't see each other all that often, so most of us have seen different sides of all these talks. So if you see anything you like, you can go on the website. Just ping one of us. I think we have a hip chat room that we'll probably start disbanding soon, but just ask one of us. We can just let you know what we thought of the talk outside of this presentation.
Do you have a list of like the top talks?
Yeah, so next one. So I'll kick it off. Yeah, I know. This would have been impossible if we had talked through all of them. So we each went to all the talks for pretty much all the days until we flew out. So obviously 3 by any means is not what we learned. So each of us is just going to give a quick intro to like the 3 favorite ones. Favorite is a loose term I'm using here. Like I liked other ones too. I just picked these 3 for now. So just to talk through the ones that I liked. So some of the things that I went to, and I know Panos was a lot of the same ones that I had gotten to notice, was they spent a lot of time in tracks talking about kind of not tech-focused topic things, but things that affect our industry or our companies. There's a lot of best practices that were shared, so some of the things like the Google Talk we're kind of talking through. And I don't know how many people saw, there was a Times, very large magazine spread about how Google uses all its data on the HR side and how they organize their dev teams by like how people have worked together in the past and how many, like even everything from like lines of code you've committed in the past to comments to your personality to where you're from to. And they looked at like 1,000 something different variables, the guy said, and they basically went and said, what makes a good team great or what makes a better team terrible, right? And they try to apply a data-driven mindset to that. So this guy is one of the directors of that group. Fairly personal talk. He weaved his entire personal story through the talk. I thought that was the best part. So why I put a crying gif? I mean, the guy, to be honest, he started off and basically kicked it off saying, I have cancer, I'm going to die in this many months, and this is how I look at my life. And then he just kicked off. Everyone, this is a room full of probably 800, 900 people. Like, this is just the map. This is the biggest conference room, and everyone's just like, just standing there, right? So definitely a good public speaker, not trained by any means for that role. He's director engineering type role anyways, but what he wanted to do is try and prove the point that from what they noticed, it was each team did psychological safety, but it's really how do you feel comfortable with your peers. So that example, right, his story, what he did was share that with his team members, and he realized, oh, I learned a lot more about my team members by sharing something personal about myself, right? And this should be obvious, right? If you're friends with the people you work with, you tend to work better, right? And that tends to hold true at our office, but as we look at some of our clients and things like that, there could be some interesting things we could pass on from there. So there wasn't anything terribly surprising, so to speak, but it was just a good thing to kind of hear it validated. And the guy kind of weaved all sorts of questions, answers, all their data. Those of you who've read the Times article, that thing was like a beast. It took like 5 days to read anyways, but this added a lot more on top of it too. So that's a good one to just rewatch the hour. The guy's super engaging, so it's a really good one to just listen to if you're curious to learn more. The next gen startup was someone from CrowdStrike, which I at least never heard of. I don't know if anyone's heard of that company, but what he talked through was kind of how do you enable like a startup culture within your own company. So their company apparently used to be a startup, and now there's hundreds and hundreds of people, and it feels very big and distributed and remote, and no one sees each other anymore. So think of like culture club type stuff, but like multiplied by 10 was kind of what his talk was about. So how do you kind of enable that, like a place where people really want to actually work and come to for X amount of % of their lives pretty much, right? And how do you make them stay just willingly and not just like salary? Some things just like that. And it's not, the office time table and all those kind of perks, but how do you weave all that together into something that feels like authentic? So he talks through a lot of those kind of strategies and gave like actually reasonably practical tips that you could pass on to someone in leadership and be like, hey, can we do more of these things here at Solomon? And probably a lot of them are things that are coming up next year anyway, so. Or have things we've already done in past years. For those who've been here a while, you can see there's been changes, right? That some are beneficial too that we see on this floor at least. Don't know why I picked the Nick Cage gift, but that worked. Last one, picked one of the tech talks. So obviously Netflix had a fairly large presence at this conference. I think Uche picked only Netflix talks for your 3, but they had like 30 people there talking. It was crazy, but they did do a lot of cool stuff. I mean, you guys have seen the tech blogs and things that they put out there, but this one in particular, I don't know if anyone's heard of Visceral, but it's their tool that they use to kind of track. The guy deemed his talk intuition engineering. He was kind of out there a little bit, but what he was trying to prove was, is there better ways we can understand the massive flows of data that we have without using like a graph or like a chart or God forbid a report or someone telling someone else, right? And so what they did, if you just click on that little, apparently you can embed videos in Google Slides, just view it. All right, so that fancy graphic there, each of those things, if I can't read this right now, is one of the AWS we use for Netflix running live when they film this video. And so all it's doing is just telling you, hey, how's traffic flowing between our networks, right? And eventually in that video, which I'll probably stop talking before it finishes, they basically had a server issue, and one of them, something cuts off, there's something catastrophic, they have to shut down a region. How do they pass over traffic seamlessly and show that in kind of a visual? So his whole point of his talk was different mediums to start, okay, there it goes. So different mediums to how they do fail-safe cutovers, and how do you do different types of visuals. So he was talking through some crazy things in the beginning. They built this giant, he called it a paint suit, I don't know what they were talking about, but like it's basically they wired up this huge suit to this guy, like one of those green man things, and they had all these sensors, and they were like testing to see like, if I give you like a pulse on your wrist, will you know that like that means the AWS East region died? Serious. This was basically what he talked to. There was some crazy ideas by the end too, but it was like, how do we look at new ways of not just database, but understanding like things that we get from our, infrastructure, and how do we kind of work through that? So that was an interesting talk from my side.
I remember seeing that video before. It was really cool because they showed like a little blip, and it's like you wouldn't notice it in the logs, but seeing it visually, right?
Yeah.
These draws your attention to it, then you need something else to actually find the issue.
And you definitely need the scale. I mean, his thing was like petabytes of or more flowing across things and thousands and hundreds of real-time connections. There was some other examples, like I know the first I want to say one of the first talks that I think one of you guys is going to talk through, but the Uber one too, they showed their actual microservice dependency graph, and it's just like, oh man, it's a cluster.
And they were also, like, I guess to test it, they were using like Chaos Monkey, which I think Kusha is going to be talking about a little bit. But they, in order to like, replicate this entire situation, they use Chaos Monkey, which is one of their tools, which is kind of cool. Me and Kusha attended that.
Cool.
I think I'm next. Yeah. So, as Mahir said, I didn't join too many technical talks. I went to with soft, hard skills, as I call them, like some of these skills of presenting, of communicating, of building teams and stuff like that. They're the soft skills, but sometimes they're hard enough. So yeah, I participated in most of these talks. The first talk I participated was the art and science of compelling people. So this lady was actually working for a company that is a consulting company that goes to other companies and trains people how to be great leaders and how to present themselves, how to stand in a room and everything. So of course she was like an amazing speaker, great presentation. She was there, she was powerful. She showed some skills and frameworks how to become a great leader and like through building the credibility and trust. And it was interesting like how when you stand in a room, how like the visual and the vocal is like much stronger than the verbal side of your speech. And then this graph down here is like how your skill and your will define you. So if you're like very skillful but you're not willing to do stuff, you're like in these quadrants and stuff like that. So pretty cool talk. It was fun to see her speak, and it was like a very powerful talk. Another talk I actually saw and I really liked was playing with feedback without getting burned. So it was like two people, a lady and a guy, Angela Okawa and Kai Munch, I think. They did show the SOL technique, and they described the SOL technique. So it's like find the right setup, address the person the right way, listen to what they have to say during the feedback providing process, and then make sure you get takeaways after you provide the feedback. Probably I'll take that and I'll use it to the leadership competency group for sure. They did this little live sketch. It was awesome. Like you could actually see, it was far-fetched a little bit, but you could see how by giving bad feedback, by giving feedback in a bad way, how it impacted the other person while they were talking, how his body language changed while he was doing the good feedback. It was pretty fun. Then the last thing they talked about was the feedback culture of different countries. They said specifically for Germany, the feedback is like straight. They're like, you did it wrong, you have to fix it. It's like very straight feedback. For Asian cultures, the feedback is like very, very, very indirect. So if you had to give an example, 3 reports, and the 2 of them were good, they would be like, oh yeah, report 2 and 3 were awesome, but report 1 was not even mentioned, so it was not as good. So yeah, like they would actually like, because you didn't mention it, it means it wasn't good. So very indirect feedback. So the SALT mechanism and the SALT technique is like a middle layer, and this is what they promote here. The last talk, well, not the last talk, but the last talk I have here is maximizing human potential. That was the most interesting talk I've ever seen. The lady Vivienne Mink, very interesting woman, very, very interesting woman, says I research is like one of the top 10 women in tech industry you should follow. From 2012, I think they said that. She was talking about how to use machine learning and technology to give superpowers to humans, pretty much. What she was working on a company, and she was saying, like, this company actually, through machine learning, they were able to find the best candidates for recruitment. They were able to recruit the best candidates for a job. So how they did it, they went through GitHub commits. So they got all the GitHub commits, they got Twitter comments. So if you tweeted about something about Happy and Node.js and you're passionate about, they will like accounted that in there. and like through this stuff and would just like pick up a candidate for the perfect candidate for the job without any biases. So the first how she started, she was like, well, what does your resume need to have? Your resume needs to have your name. So if your name is weird, you're not going to get hired. If your most recent job, that's the second part. So if you didn't work for Google or like some fancy, crazy company, you're not going to get hired. And your school, if you're not from the top 10 schools, you're not going to get hired easily. So yeah, her algorithm and like her machine learning was like it could hire and recruit people without biases. It was pretty cool. The lady was interesting itself. She said a story about Obama and how she created the machine learning program to track her son's diabetes problems and how he would have like a blood sugar shock, like an incident. So she loves Google Glass, so she was wearing the Google Glass, and she went to meet Obama, and Obama and his Secret Service team took 5 minutes of his time to decide if she should wear the glass or not in the White House. So she actually went up to Obama and described her algorithm and what she was wearing it for, and Obama let her wear it for the conversation. So why she was wearing it, like as I said, she had this program that through machine learning it would like predict when her son would have like a blood shock, like low blood sugars incident, and would notify her in the Google Glass, and then she could like tap and send to her whoever was taking care of her son to like feed him something because he's gonna have like a problem. So it was pretty cool, very interesting lady. She was all over the place. Her speech was like not structured at all. She said at one point, I'm gonna say 3 things, and she said, whatever you do, go all in and do it. Like whatever you do right now, just go all in, give all yourself and stuff. And just start talking forever, and she never said the two last ones. And somebody was like, okay, so you said the first one. What are the other 2? The last 30 seconds of your talk. She's like, oh yeah, construct your own purpose, and then die and start all over, which means if you reach your peak on your career and you like feel you're static and you feel you don't move forward, just do something else. Just change something. You have to like start over for your own benefit. Her speech ended with just effing die. So it was a very vulgar lady, very, very interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed her talk. It was very all over the place, but it was interesting to see a powerful person speak in front of you. That's it.
So, did they ask how to invert binary trees?
Do they ask? Sorry.
For science?
Okay, who's next? I didn't.
I guess
I didn't hear it.
they asked how to invert a binary tree
Still did.
It's, yeah. Did you have Google tried to recruit?
She mentioned the whole
Oh, she did?
The Ruby developer.
The Homebrew guy, who was like the one who wrote the whole language, right? And Google was like, do this.
Yeah, they asked him to invert a binary tree,
Oh.
so he lost his job.
I see.
Even though something like a third of their engineers use this program.
Yeah.
She did mention a story about her recruiting tool actually hired a Ruby developer. Jade Dominguez is his name. He has like barely high school degree. He like never went to college, but he really liked to code, and he like went to Ruby, and he was like one of the top contributors in like the open source Ruby GitHub repo. So they hired him, like her company hired him, and she was like, he was a little bit rough on the edges working with the team, but he was actually a good developer. That was her. Like they did put their tool into action and they tried it out for their own benefits too. Cool. Avi.
Alright, where did I go to? A bunch of different stuff. So there were a lot of talks on architecture, it seemed like, so I kind of tried to vary it a little bit, go to the different tracks. The first one I'm going to talk about is engineering your best self. So this talk was actually by 2 people, and they were improv comedians, which was kind of weird for a tech conference, but it was all about how you maximize the potential of a team or a company, but specifically a team that you interact with every day. And so the three main things they talked about were embracing failure, saying yes, and sharing control. And the one that I thought was really interesting was their take on embracing failure. So what their point was is you want to foster an atmosphere where it's okay to fail, and they said that you should do that not just by, you know, when you say it's okay to fail, that implies that you did something wrong, that, you know, failure is something that's bad. They want you to actually embrace failure as something that's good, because not only it's not like you hurt somebody by failing, but you actually learn something. So they had us do these exercises. They were like physical exercises where, I don't know, you would like rub your stomach and tap your head and whatever. But they were difficult. And when the room first started out, there was this, you know, everyone's trying to do this thing, and everyone's like, oh shoot, you know, I keep messing up, whatever. Afterwards, the second time they had us do it, every time, so you would do it with a partner, every time one of you screwed up, you would have to be like, woohoo, and then start again. So it sounds really stupid, and it was. But when we started doing this woohoo thing, the entire atmosphere of the room changed. Suddenly, when people failed, it wasn't, oh shoot, you know, all right, we got to start again. It was like, all right, cool, let's do this again. That was fun. There were smiles around the room, and they kept track of our progress, and people actually improved significantly when we were doing this woohoo thing. And their idea was that by not being afraid to fail, we're actually just focusing on doing the thing instead of kind of psyching ourselves out and worrying about it. So I think that's definitely something we could bring to, you know, our project teams and just trying to foster a safe atmosphere, I guess. I thought that was pretty cool.
Just walk around the office and just hear, woohoo!
Yeah. All right, the next thing was how Slack works. So it was by Keith Adams. He's like the chief architect, or I don't know what his exact title is, but he's like way up there in Slack. Smart guy. So he kind of gave an overview of Slack and the various challenges they face as a company in terms of like technical stuff. So we all use Slack, I'm pretty sure. So they have a large amount of data that they have to handle in each Slack instance, but it also has to be real time, and then they have tons of events going back and forth. So he described their solution to this, but also at the same time, when you enter a chat program, you want it to be instant. You don't want it to be loading stuff constantly, especially when you have all these files and whatever stored in your instance. So their solution to this thing is something they call RTM start. So basically, when you first log into Slack, they send this like huge payload of, you know, what is your the state of your team's Slack instance right now, and then they send a token with it, which is basically a cursor. So it's like, all right, this was like the snapshot at this time. So it loads that, and from then on, the Slack program that you have running, it only gets diffs from the central server. So that improves load time a little bit, because you're not constantly pushing this huge payload back and forth of tons of messages and things that are constantly changing, like present status, like whether someone's online or offline. But you also have this like real-time feel to the thing. So I thought this talk was cool because it was interesting to see that like how a different type of application is architected. I feel like we at Slalom we don't see Slack type applications very frequently. It's mostly like, oh, here's an API, you hit it, and here's a front end, and it does its thing.
I think so. I was with Avi in this talk, and a couple of things that I found really cool about this guy and like him presenting Slack, because Slack was still, I mean, a lot of people use Slack, but it was still like they were giving like an introduction on Slack and how it started off and everything. So one of the things was Slack was originally a game company, or they were like trying to produce a game, and they pivoted from that, and they were like, okay, this looks like there's a pretty big niche market here, so you know we can go into that space. And the second thing he said is the way to actually test their entire product that they've built to today is go to your phone and then send like a link of something, like let's say a Twitter link, to yourself, and that'll touch every point of their product just by doing that, which is kind of cool. Because it also, like, along with that link, it also sends you like a brief like description of what that link is, similar to what HipChat does. So that touches like everything.
So by doing that, you know that everything is working in Slack.
Yeah, so if you go to production, if you just like, you know, deploy a new feature, that would be his fail-safe way of testing it quickly. So
he also mentioned that they have the largest, well, not largest, but they're all PHP, which was news to some of us at least to me. So yeah, and they literally, he kicked it off. He was smart. He was like, yep, use PHP. Immediate next slide was, why do we use PHP? Well, it sort of works. Next question. Moved past it, and he gave a good, like, frank assessment of it worked for us. We're still using it. Each team is like its own little instance that exists only by itself, because you're never going to talk to another Slack team, right? Why would you? You're not in their Slack team. So they're still stuck true to that assumption, and now it's like this massive, like, he's like, yeah, it's going to be fun to scale, but we're working on it. So yeah, I mean, they address some of those challenges too, which you don't always get a good behind the scenes from someone who's a chief architect of a company, right? So that was a good, interesting. That was like the first talk at Qcon, one of the first. So it was a good way to start for most of us.
All right. The last one I want to talk about is this talk by Connor Tumbleson called "Exploring the Android APK," and it was basically about security. He used the example of Pokemon Go, which was, you know, this huge event that happened, super popular. Everyone was talking about it for a while, and lots of people really cared about imaginary game points. So they would try to kind of game the system. So he basically, what he talked about was how people were deconstructing Android APKs and finding out secrets like upcoming events, upcoming like resources. So they'd look at resource files like images and strings and try to figure out what's going on. And then they would also modify the APK. So it's running, like once your APK, I think, is installed and it's running, there aren't many other checks that happen. So people would use rooted phones to kind of hot swap code into their APK and abuse the Pokemon Go API. So, you know, the API thinks it's still, you know, their secure Pokemon Go application that's making these calls, but really it's this dude that's using that to, you know, figure out where Pokemon are or other things. And he also talked a little bit about how to prevent this type of stuff from happening in your own application. Like one of the things where, so usually in Android apps we just include all resource, looked right into it. We just include all resource files like images and strings, whatever. But if we want something to be secret, he mentioned that a good way to do it would be for the secret things, you just want to have some sort of like reference number or whatever to it, and it'll load it and cache it from the server instead of actually having it in the APK file itself, since then it can't be deconstructed.
It's similar to web apps, right? Like you're not going to put, like it's like financial, you're not going to put like, the account balance
Right.
like in the JavaScript in the front end.
Right. Yeah.
Just let the client then change it to whatever you want.
Right. Yeah. Oh, so like another thing he mentioned is because of this type of stuff, Android has actually changed recently to using a more, what happened? Okay. To using a more like secure way of handling and figuring out whether an APK has been modified. They use this thing called Android Safety Net, which things like Android Pay and other like secure applications use, and that basically guarantees you that the section of code that you're running has not been modified since it's been downloaded from the Play Store. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. Next. Oh, sorry. There you go.
All right. A couple of my favorite talks, in no particular order. Start out with failure testing research at Netflix, and this kind of comprised of how academia and industry kind of collaborated to produce a successful service that Netflix is currently using right now. The example they used was using this theoretical model of lineage-driven fault injection, which was devised by this Peter Alvaro guy. He's a professor over at Berkeley. Wrote up a whole paper about it, performed like a prototype, which is named Molly, which he produced a paper on, and basically how that works. To describe what it does, you provided some successful outcome of a distributed system, say like a successful write, durable persistent write to Cassandra database, and to do so, to do some kind of write through that, you'd maybe publish a message through a queue. It'd be consumed by some services, and up the stack you get that message written to Cassandra or something. So basically what this model would attempt to do would be to formally specify that completely out in this language he kind of devised, Dataless, which is like a subset of data log, some logic language, formal specification, real academic-like, that probably maybe nine of us have probably tried out, but it kind of designs out that whole flow and attempts to figure out failures within that flow, maybe network partitions or instance failures or something like that. I thought it was interesting because they did a lot of role-playing back and forth with the guy from Netflix, Colton, and Peter, the professor. So it was an interesting talk. Also, there was a plug for what Colton's doing right now, which he separated from Netflix and started up his own company, Gremlin Inc., which is similar to Chaos Monkey, but a lot more advanced and likely applies some of these techniques. More Netflix talks. This one was on automating chaos experiments in production. I didn't actually attend this one, but since it was on the Wednesday when I was flying out, but I did watch it when I got back and was pretty interested. So I should have stayed for that, but oh well. So it was by Ali Bansiri. He started out basically by talking about the evolution of chaos engineering at Netflix, how it evolved from Chaos Monkey, which they implemented about 5 years ago, into a more automated platform. Chaos Monkey, that right now is open sourced, and all that does is takes out instances randomly within your system, and it allows you to test out resiliency. That evolved for them into a more automated platform called failure injection testing, FIT. And they took a more refined approach to this chaos engineering. They, instead of at an instance level failures, they started injecting failures within requests by tagging certain headers, saying where it's going to fail at a certain service and how it's going to fail. And Zool, a gateway router, would route that particular service accordingly. Recently, they developed another homegrown platform, chaos automation platform, or chat. It does much of what the failure injection testing was doing, but more at, it reduces the blast radius of the affected user base. So kind of draw things out, I guess, get a good picture of how this system works out. So you have a standard request coming into a gateway router, say Netflix Zool or something. All this is going to do is route out that request to the necessary services, or in this case, we're going to route it to like a RESTful API. And from that API, it can be dependent on some service, say X, doesn't matter. Now, say they wanted to test this out, and they wanted to inject a failure into it. With the chat platform that they devised, it will actually clone particular services according to whatever your target services you want to fail. In this case, we'd want to fail the target service X. So we'd clone out a few instances of the API cluster into, say, a control group and an experimental group. So these clusters are cloned exactly from that, sized down according to how the percentage of requests that are going to be made to those clusters, say like 1%. So you want 1% going to each of these clusters. The rest of the 98% of the requests are going to go through the normal flow. So the Zool router knows how to route these requests based on like the tags that are applied to it within filters in this gateway. Maybe at random or something. It's determined by this dashboard utility that they devised. So now what do you do with these like the control group and the experimental group? Well, beforehand, what you got to figure out some kind of metric that you want to test out. And the example they used, they wanted to like test out the streams per second or something, and the performance of that. So they'd have some kind of graph detailing out the performance lines of the control group and the experimental group, and then they'd start to execute these tests. As it runs, and they run it through production actually, they, in real time, they can view these graphs to see the performance. If the performance of control and experiment remain the same, you can tell that the new feature or something that was merged into master is okay. And to kind of back up a little bit, there was a on these requests that come in, there's also a tag to kind of simulate that there was a failure in here. So for all experimental requests, it's going to think that the X service is not working. So how does this react to that? And that's where the viewing those graphs comes in handy. I don't have much time, so move on. Principlesofchaos.org, they kind of coined this whole chaos engineering term. Future work they have is integrating the service and continuous delivery system. I'd like to see some, I feel like a lot of this is kind of the future, since it's starting from Chaos Monkey. I feel that's going to evolve somewhat more in the open source community as well. Another talk, scaling Instagram. There's tons of scaling talks. This one stood out to me because I got the most out of it. There was other scaling talks by Dropbox, Spotify, Netflix, but the one by Instagram by Lisa here was pretty well organized. Organized it into 3 different sections: scaling out, scaling up, and scaling the team. Scaling out was just focusing on infrastructure decisions, choosing the proper databases to use, proper queuing systems, and whatnot. And from there, you can scale up. You can optimize those systems some more to be more efficient, say on memory or CPU cycles. And then she got into scaling the team and the importance of having automated configuration testing, deployment, and provisioning, so developers aren't always asking questions, well, what server do I provision this on, and yada yada. So That's all I have.
Awesome. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll just like run through mine real quick. So basically, 3 of the favorites that I had were Art and Science of Compelling People, Serverless Microservices, and Fundamentals of Stream Processing with Apache Beam. So let's go with the first one. So Art and Science of Compelling People was the same one that Panos mentioned. We tried not, like walking over each other's shoes and like, picking the same things, but I really like this one. I think more of the reason was because I think the technical side of things, like we're all really smart guys. We can like get that pretty easily. I think this is the kind of area where we need a little more polishing, and we need to work on that area a little better. So this was by, and excuse me if I butcher these names, but Ronit Avni, I think is how she pronounced her name. So she said that this was her talk was basically around techniques to communicate effectively and be compelling in your arguments. The reason you're doing that is, if you're on a team, it can be in our line of work, it can be in any line of work. This kind of applied across the board. If you're trying to lead that team, this was a talk that you should definitely attend. Panos kind of mentioned the visual, vocal, and verbal, and those numbers were 55 visual, 38 vocal, and verbal was 7%. So if you manage to get like that 55-38 in place, that 7% is like a really, really small amount that people are actually paying attention to. So your entire content of your talk can be full of crap.
Where are those numbers from?
So this was research that her private forum had done, and there were like other, I can actually put those in, but there were like a few other references that she had mentioned.
That varies between different audiences. Because if I know I'm like attending a tech talk, like I'm going to listen to specific like technical terms you're saying, so that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like,
I guess they were maybe they're talking about more from like a broader perspective and like a non-technical talk or something.
For a broader audience, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not so much programmers.
Right. But even if you take the debates that happened, and the things that came off of that wasn't necessarily content, but it was more like Donald Trump and like the sniffing sounds that he was making or things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that kind of brings us to like the last 2 points there, like gestures and nervous tics. Gestures, they don't want like people like going and flailing their arms around everywhere doing like something like this, or because this is distracting. This seems like you're a closed book and you don't want to like reveal anything about yourself. You don't want to be standing like this. You don't want to be like pacing, all those kind of things. And the funny thing, I do all these things. So that's why I could definitely relate to this. One of the other things she said was connect and lead. There were like a bunch of leaders that she referenced. There was Obama, there was Oprah Winfrey, there was like a Hillary Clinton, like a few of them. And she basically mentioned that these people tried or attempted to relate to their listeners before providing that opportunity to lead. And the other person she mentioned, which I found kind of funny, was Obama and how he always pauses when he talks. And the reason he does that is because he's a powerful person. He's a person in elevated, positions, and he doesn't feel like anyone is going to interrupt him. So that's why he can take those pauses, think of what he's about to say, and then put that out there. And I felt like she was very relatable. She had a couple of exercises for us that really helped us and kind of opened up the entire like audience speaker relationship. And yeah, I think we all 3 of us loved it. Next one was microservices without servers. This was by Jonathan Kaufman. He's a DevOps guy out of IBM. Basically, his talk was around servers are killing productivity because we're spending more time fixing our servers and like fixing vulnerabilities associated with our servers as opposed to like actually developing awesome products. One of the tweets that he kind of like referenced in his slide kind of really spoke to me, and he said that if you're a platform as a service, which is kind of what they're going towards on a serverless side, can efficiently start instances in 20 milliseconds, run for half a second, and then come back down that's when it's called serverless, and that's by Adrian Cockcroft, who is the VP of Cloud Computing in AWS. So that's something that serverless is trying to go towards, and that would be the ideal scenario, but that's not happening right now. So he kind of provided us with like a live example of OpenWhisk, which is provided by IBM, and he had like a really basic weather app that runs functions off of it. I found this talk interesting because we've done a hackathon around Amazon Alexa and working with Lambda functions. So it was kind of interesting seeing it from like another vendor's perspective. And then last one was fundamentals of stream processing. I mean, we worked with streams before. I've never really seen, the core concepts around how you should approach it, how you should work with it. Basically, the problem is data sets can get very, very large, and that data can reach your stream at variable lengths of time. This was basically a talk around how you process streams and the approach that Apache Beam uses in that processing. And the two speakers, Francis Perry and Tyler Akedo, I don't know how to say that. But basically, they've like committed to Apache Beam, and they're part of that entire ecosystem. Yeah, that was it for my three.
All right, so we talked a lot about some of the talks that at least we thought were favorites. So definitely watch a few of them. Not every single one was recorded, but their website's like super expansive. So just click through a few of them. We recommend clicking on them. If you can't access it, you can ask one of us.
Yeah.
We can get the video content, but click again. So if you're someone who cares about varieties of tech topics, you want to see all the breakdowns of all the good big name stuff like Slack and all that stuff. For some reason, if you haven't been to a city outside of Chicago, I don't know, big city travel, right? San Francisco was fun. We had a good time. You should go. Can you click again? Yeah, Panos' upper management skills, he seriously did just spend his entire time in leadership meetings to the extent where, I mean, and look at it, he's already dressed. I mean, look, right?
This is a client.
You got those close to the conference.
I did have to do it.
So if you ever want to bug Panos, call him upper management only for the next forever.
He went in a suit to the talk. I'm kidding.
All right.
Why would you want to kill trees? Why do you want to kill trees?
They have the cards and I throw them in the garbage.
See, that's the story. You just remember or you don't. The management, you remember, right? For some reason, I guess they had non-gluten. They had gluten-free food for everything, which was interesting. So if you hate that, don't go. I mean, if you're going to pay for this yourself, this is like the most expensive conference you can go to, but it's totally worth it from our perspective. So we enjoyed ourselves, and everything here is on the web too. You can click through a couple more, one more. We thought we'd share with you guys some random fun things from us. So that was our talk. Thanks for at least admitting you showed up. I don't know what else was worth. You guys should go. It's totally worth it. Get a group together. It's more fun. I went to Napa. These guys hung out, went all around. They had like a penthouse, which was sweet too. Every talk was full, but oh, we had a good time. Couché ate a lot.
Yeah, Couché had lunch by himself.
We all had that problem. And Rishi made us all very nervous in very thin seats with very hot coffee on his computer. So it's just about the life we live. But it was a good time.
Panos had a nosebleed. That was fun.
What?
You had a nosebleed?
Oh yeah, I did. It was at that time I had the nosebleed. Sorry, you asked that one?
Oh no, I'm sure it was made up question.
But it's definitely a good talk. A couple of the ones that I went to that I actually spoke about were not recorded, but like all of them are on the web. Just reach out to us.
Yeah, and the crazy lady I talked about, she has nothing. She just walked in the room and nothing. And she just like,
She just talked.
Yeah.
It was
an official speaker.
I think she just walked. I think she just like broke into the room and started talking. Like, cool.
Apparently she left an impression.
It was still good.
It left an impression on me, for sure.
That's definitely one. I think if 10 people watched that talk, they would get 8 different conclusions. But
Whose computer is this? Is this yours?
that's
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for